When I turned 9, I hosted a birthday party inviting my 10 best friends at the time. We played football, ate some pancakes, they gave gifts, and they sang for me. It was a great day all around, until in the very end, one of my friends decided to poop in his hand and smear that poop all over my Game Boy Color, that at the time had the Pokemon Silver game inserted into it. My Game Boy Color didn't survive this assault, and neither did Pokemon Silver, so I had to replay it from the very start. Now, whenever I think back of that 9th birthday, I can't seem to remember the many good parts that were there. For 5 hours we had a great time, and just a very small part kind of stunk. I feel similar about the patch that went live on North America. I think overall it's a great patch, but I do believe there are 2 stinkers in there. The first stinker that I want to talk about is the Cyclone. Now, for the people that are not aware, the Cyclone has gone through an absolutely massive list of changes. The most important ones being that the cost is reduced, that it is now built out of the reactor, and that it is just completely different. It doesn't have that very long 15 range anymore. Instead, it's more of a fighting unit, really as a core mech unit. And really to try and make mech just a little bit more viable, specifically in the TVP matchup. Now, in my opinion, this experiment has failed. I've played about, I think, 150 games total, and maybe 120 against mech or so. And in those games, I never really felt that mech was viable. That doesn't mean that I never lost to it. It just means that, so in an ideal matchup, in my mind, both races have the ability to come back into the game, and also when they're in control to kind of keep pushing that advantage forward. In Protoss versus Terran mech, even with the new Cyclone, I don't think that is possible. If Terran is ahead in the early game, Protoss has the ability to come back. And very often, those games end up being extremely fun. I'd like to state this up front. I had a great time playing some Protoss versus Terran mech. Very interactive games, constant fights all over the map. However, this seems to be only possible if Terran is ahead from the start, if through some harassment or an early build order advantage, they get some type of lead. Those games tend to be really quite interactive and much better, I would even say, than general bio games. The issue, however, is when the game is stable, or if Protoss is ahead, that Terran can't really seem to get back into it through any harassment. They can't really take any map control or just send anything out on the map. Protoss is in complete control, and this is true for the highest level, at least in my experience so far. Which means that if the goal with these Cyclone changes was to make the Cyclone a core unit in the TVP matchup for mech, I think that goal, in my mind, has failed. Now, if the unit is a bit too weak, this is obviously not the end of the world. However, there is a second issue that I really struggle with, and that is the issue of the all-ins. Now, some people might not remember, but a while ago in 2020, Blizzard did a final patch before they said, we're not developing the game anymore. This was in August of 2020, and they did a triple buff to the Void Ray. In my mind, this is one of the worst patches that StarCraft has had, as it made Void Rays way too strong in PvZ, and it made Proxy Stargate very strong in PvT as well. Now, in PvZ, what ended up happening is that we had 2 Stargate into Disruptor or 2 Stargate into Storm for a year and a half as the standard, providing some of the most dull and boring games that I've seen in my life. But what might have been even worse was that for a very large portion of the ladder, the PvT matchup was almost exclusively getting Proxy Stargated. If you have any Terran friends between the ranges of 4k MMR and 6k MMR, that period lives as a very dark time in their minds, because every single Protoss player, or a lot of Protoss players, would just Proxy Stargate every single game, and it would be so hard to stop. The abilities needed to execute the Proxy Stargate were almost none. Like any brain dead idiot could really play a Proxy Void Ray type of build order with batteries there and have an insanely good win rate. But as a Terran, you needed such specific responses to deal with it that it really felt like it wasn't completely even there. The unit wasn't necessarily imbalanced at the highest level, because the highest level Terrans could hold it, but at the lower level, it felt that the input that the TOS had versus the input that the Terran needed to do was completely out of whack. Now, I am afraid, I'm not sure if this is true, but I'm afraid, and from what I've seen and from what I've tried myself with Terran, is that we've given Terran a couple of these Void Ray rushes. I'm not saying they're as strong. I'm just saying that there's a good possibility that there will be some build orders here for Terran that will be extremely easy to execute and will require a very specific response out of Protoss player between that 4K and 6K range, where it will be very hard to hold them. I am not so worried about myself in this case. I actually believe that for me, the Cyclone is quite nice. It allows me to play oracles more. There will be different build orders. I get to do some strategizing, which is a part of StarCraft 2 that I really enjoy. So overall, I actually think this is going to be quite fun for me. Yes, I'll die a lot, and even high-level tossers are going to die against Cyclone All-ins, don't get me wrong. But overall, I think in the end, we'll figure it out. We'll know a way to be safe, get into the mid-game, and then take it from there. What I'm worried about is that the moves in order to get to that mid-game are going to be too difficult to copy for lower-level players. So I'm still very afraid of the Cyclone just being too strong there. Then on top of the fact that it hasn't really achieved its goal of being a viable core unit in mech, I think this is a risk that I'd rather not take. Putting the Cyclone in the state that it currently is. I'm not saying 100% that I'm right. I'm just saying that there doesn't seem to be a very big payoff at the end there because it didn't achieve the mech role. I'm fairly certain about that. And there is a possibility of maybe, even if it's just 25%, that the 4K to 6K range is going to be absolutely terrorized by Cyclone builds. Now, I hope I'm wrong about this, and I'm not sure where these percentages exactly lie, but it is. I just don't quite understand why this particular iteration made it through. Now, the second stinker is the Baneling, the green roly boy over here. 4 changes were announced, and out of those 4, I don't mind 3 of them. I think the first one, the damage bonus per upgrade reduced from +2 and +2 versus light to just +2, I think is a very good change because it means that Banelings with the +2 melee attack upgrade do not one-shot workers anymore. And I think that was one of the most frustrating interactions in the game. I'm very glad that is gone. The central fuel hook cost reduction and the research time reduction I think are fine. I don't mind buffing timings with Banelings. I think these were very rare anyway, and it might make some defenses against certain 2-base all-ins a little bit easier. However, the centrifugal hook's health bonus being removed, in my mind, has the potential to completely switch win rates around. It's completely destroy matchups. I am not sure about this. I haven't seen enough TVZ's bio on the new patch to know whether this is true. And I think another thing that is kind of insidious about that is that those interactions won't be as clear. Imagine you have a scenario where you have Beyond versus Zero and they're playing Ling Bane versus Marine Tank. Sometimes Zero will win, sometimes Beyond will win. So even if you have a certain situation with Ling Bane in it where the Zerg player will lose, you can't necessarily say, hey, that they lost because of the 5 health reduction. You can say it was a factor in it, but you don't know how big that factor is. In order to really see kind of what the impact was of this change, you need a lot of games, and then you just check the win rate. I think that is the wisest thing to do. And I don't think there's enough data on that, personally, to make this change, which I understand wanting to make the Baneling a little bit more prominent in certain matchups, but especially in TVZ, I think this is a massive change. This is a unit that gets built 300, 400, 500 times every single game in TVZ. If the game lasts more than 15 minutes, it's going to, a lot of interactions are influenced by it. Even just the Marine is going to require less shots to kill a Baneling. That is really quite big in my opinion. And I don't think that Terran was struggling in TVZ. I don't necessarily think that Protoss was struggling in PVZ very much against the Baneling either. And even if it was, I think the +2 removal was very, very big already for Protoss defensively. Removing the health there, from what I've played in Protoss versus Zerg, it made the matchup much, much easier. It's hard to say, but I felt that my win rate against certain player improved by almost 10, 15 entire points. So rather than just having a 50% win rate against someone, I would go up to 65. I think that is a huge difference in win rate with just what I felt a single change. Everyone is pretty much forced into Roach Hydra Lurker builds or some type of Hydraling Bane all-in, but building Banelings after Splash is out already for Protoss seems to be a pretty decently sized error right now in the patch that is live. and I don't quite understand that. On top of that, there's one thing in combination that I still want to mention, and that is that the Cyclone in TVZ, from what I've heard, is that it's not too strong as a mech composition unit, but what it does do is that it's a very easy way to deny scouting in the early game. So you can open up with 2 Hellions and then maybe a Hellion and a Cyclone, and you have a very consistent way of denying scouting. Now, add in the fact that there's 5 less health on Banelings, makes it harder to scout for Zerg, and I think 2 base all-ins are going to be quite a bit stronger as well. I think this is a pretty indirect buff to 2 base all-ins from Terran, which I don't think really needed to be buffed. And it sounds like I'm quite critical now, but overall I think this patch is actually extremely good. I really believe that this is one of the best patches that StarCraft 2 has had in a very long time, even with those 2 stinkers in it. If you go back to the last patch that Blizzard did, I think that patch was significantly worse and had significantly worse effects as well than I think this will. Now, I still am afraid of the Cyclone. I still am afraid of what the Baneling is going to do to the win rate. But I'm also very excited to just test everything that's new. I'm really looking forward to strategizing against the Cyclone, seeing what's kicking off over there. You know, what can I get away with? How much stronger are Oracle openers there? Are Sentry openers maybe a bit more viable? Like there's a lot of moving parts. And to me, that is one of the most interesting things of StarCraft 2. I've seen a lot of online discussion of people saying that RTSs should be kept stable and consistent like Brood War. But in my mind, the most fun thing of an RTS is not people clicking buttons very fast, but it's when things change and you see ingenious strategies. Like whether that's an all-in or some type of brilliant defense against an all-in that seemingly is unstoppable. And I also think that the 9 new maps that have been added will definitely add into that diversity. This is the first time ever that there's 9 maps rather than 7. And I think that is a very, very positive change. But yeah, the Cyclone and the Bane, they really do feel like my Game Boy Color is being pooped on. And that I'm not a huge fan of after what happened when I turned 9. So, curious to hear what you guys and gals have to say about it. Please leave your responses in the comments. I'll be reading and responding to them as well in the first couple of hours. If you have any big insights, what do you think of everything? What do you think of the Cyclone in particular? What do you feel about the Baneling nerf? Do you think it's too big? Do you think it's too little? Do you think we should limit Zergs in a different way, perhaps by only letting them play with a single hand or maybe shooting their kneecaps? Be sure to tell me all about it, and I hope to see all of you next time for more videos. Bye bye.